Another use case that we talk off off call, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have been itching to hear about since the start of this conversation has been generative AI and large language models, since the foundation of all of that is at the end of the day data, which you guys thrive in. So what does Gen AI mean to Blue Sheets at this point in time?
I can tell you that we are extremely excited about the topic in itself. I think what we see is a massive opportunity for us is to incorporate LLMs into our system, and these LLMs it will be provided as foundation models, and I guess it will be the usual suspect. So this will be the cloud providers. So I guess we can't really wait for them to actually opening up them in a bigger way. I think some of the LLMs, the models themselves, they have to be tuned a little bit more towards enterprise use cases before we can actually operationalize them to a great extent. But we've seen some great progress there. And just to give you a bit of a sense of where we stand in the evolution, this is our opinion. I think Microsoft has just released numbers that for Q3, they're expecting 1% of their revenue, cloud revenue, to come from AI and related fields.
Mm,
So now that's not just LLM related. That means a very small fraction is currently being operationalized. And we understand that. So I think when we talk to our corporate clients, first and foremost, we try to deliver the message that nobody is too late on the topic right now. However, we're discussing with them the first POCs already at this point. So there's several come across our desk. And I think in general, the topic is very exciting. I just listened to a podcast where I heard a very interesting analogy between automation and AI in general, but also related to foundational models. So automation used to be building a staircase to the moon one step at a time, which is a very tedious process. And now, thanks to new technologies that we can be tapping into, whether they are already provided on the cloud as a service or
mm,
whether those are plain APIs, now we can add skyscraper to our staircase at a time, right? So there's still no sort of rocket access to the moon, but eventually, right now, we're greatly enabled to build better products, and from an automation perspective, also just really supercharge where we can go and how we can get there. So I'll say, as a summary here, we're very excited, and I think we can't wait to have actually the first sort of successful POC with our enterprise tenant completed. Yeah.
yeah, and I think what's really interesting is that I guess regardless of whether you guys knew or not that Gen AI was gonna be hot this year, from the time that you guys started out this company, like Blue Sheet is already positioned. Like you're not really having to change anything about the company to actually really tap into this space. I know, Christian, you set up that analogy of staircase versus skyscrapers to the moon. Maybe you could be a little bit more concrete in terms of what that means in terms of where Blue Sheets is in terms of the LLM value chain, right? Like in terms of the
Mhm.
process for a company to set up their own, say for example, vertical LLM or industry LLM, like I guess like Bloomberg has done, right, with their own
Exactly.
GPT thing. Yeah, where were you
Yeah.
guys, yeah, situated?
Yeah, I think let me just quickly start maybe one step back here. So I think we see this as like a industry that unfolds into sort of three different categories. The one are the foundational models in itself. So they're going to be provided by the large players. You have the cloud players. They will have their own language models. You'll have the guys like Bloomberg who released one, Salesforce, for example. So we'll see these come up. And so Lucius isn't competing with these foundational model players in any way. Where we see ourselves is on the next stage, which is more or less that infrastructure play, or basically we're trying to provide a solution to orchestrate LLMs in a better way, whether that is helping our clients to tune those LLMs, hopefully made available through the cloud, or whether that is for us just to really enhance the data sets that those LLMs can ingest. Yeah. And so that's where we see ourselves right now. The third layer, by the way, is the application layer itself. So how it actually surfaces to the end user. And I think it could very well be that we also build some capabilities there. But first and foremost, I think we're on the orchestration layer, and that's where we want to provide solutions for our clients, tangible solutions. In general, like here, we're at the very early stages of this. As right now, we're using several different techniques to prepare data for our clients, natural language processing and various machine learning techniques. But as I said earlier, we're still at that stage where we're discussing the first POC with our clients on how we can actually make use of LLMs and feed our data sets into a tuned version of an LLM. And I think in general, the industry is still early in that regard. So, and I think
Right.
enterprise is currently in a stage of understanding and figuring out how to best make use. The way that we will be hopefully surfacing this technology mostly is unlike we're currently interacting. So right now, most people understand these LLMs in form of a tool to converse with a natural language. Like obviously ChatGPT is that application that we're all referring to here. But I think we're going to be changing that modality to this technology quite a bit in the future. So it's not about having a natural language input the process into that tool. I think for us, what it is about is going from an automation perspective, say from one step at a time to have a user easily activate several steps at once by making use of that technology. So here you can probably, thanks to the technology, skip many steps in the middle. It will still require us to be and stay at that level as to orchestrate these steps. Like we have to make sure that we do have the integrations to the legacy systems. We do have to make sure that we have security layers in place and all of that. So that's going to be us. We're going to make sure of that. But the actual sort of manual component that comes in, it's the starting point, for example, of a chain of events. I think this can be greatly enhanced and it will be, yeah, it will supercharge thanks to that technology. I think that's what we're going to see in the next few years. But yeah, this opinion might change eventually as well.
Yeah, I know ChatGPT is definitely the modality that a lot of us are used to, but
Yeah.
certainly, especially as we see more API integrations, there's a lot more applications where the user doesn't necessarily have to think anymore about the prompt and it just
Mhm.
select from a menu because you already see the particular use cases that the organization needs it for. I wanted to, you talked about tuning and orchestrating how the organization uses their data to build their own large language model, for example. What are the particular pain points in that area that you're trying to solve, or maybe that you want to prioritize over others?
First of all, we can all be very grateful that companies like OpenAI have come out and released their first versions of this to the world, knowing they weren't perfect yet, in the sense that people respond to getting awkward behavior back from the engines, the release date, and so on and so forth. So to be fair, these are the early sort of hiccups that will stay with us for a while. And it all goes back to the reinforcement learning. I think there is no real way of doing this right or wrong. If you listen to the people at the very top of this company, they're kind of admitting that right now it's not even clear if the way that we do reinforcement learning right now, which is why human feedback is the most scalable and perfect way. And so when it comes to the consumer side, I think I would say we'd be a little bit less bullish about how fast can the industry involve into something that doesn't have to be immediately regulated. Yeah. However, I think what's more important here from enterprise side is that when you're addressing pain points inside the company and you're relying on data sets from inside the company, some of these little hiccups that we see right now, they can be sorted out much quicker. And I think that's definitely the part where we are excited about, where we see ourselves. We want to create these robust data sets which will allow for easy model application and also, again, limit the exposure to any kind of hiccups that we might see from the outside provided by this model. And so that's where we feel we can come in strong. So data infrastructure plays part of this. Another part is just in general helping to bridge the gap between what's currently being connected and integrated in terms of automation. So that's always going to be an issue for corporates. You have different sort of buckets, different data sets, they sit siloed somewhere. And it's not so easy to actually connect them or combine them. And I think that's definitely where we want to come in and provide that relief as well. We can call those data lakes. You can also just call them enhanced data sets. So I think that's where we see ourselves come in. And then ultimately linking them up with the LLMs, that's going to be hopefully also what we will be great at and using their APIs to a great extent. What I said earlier is true. Like in many ways is we will be relying on the foundation models to be made available in the clouds. And
Hmm.
I'm not questioning that's going to happen. I think it's going to happen, but it's probably still a little bit too early for everybody to understand as to how easy is it to just quickly apply via an API that's made available by, say, Microsoft or or AWS or
Mm.
Google. I think here it's an exploration stage right now. And yeah, we'll be one of the first, hopefully one of the first tools that can run the first POC. And if they're successful, then that's going to be great for everybody asking the clients.
Yeah, Claire, I wanted to ask also in terms of like how this might, I know I mentioned earlier the Blue Sheets lends itself readily into this kind of space, but how do you see Blue Sheets sort of operations having to adapt as you guys, Christian mentioned about running the POCs, and once that shows some promise, then obviously you're going to roll that out, right? So how do you see that impacting Blue Sheets operations down the line?
Yeah, so I think at the starting point, as Christian said, we are very much in this exploratory phase, and us feel like we will be pioneers in this space as that technology does become more available and deployed to cloud. And being that infrastructure, of course, when we take a look at the kind of client base that we serve, we have a huge number of considerations that are a little bit separate to the current GDP application, where we can go out and automate anything which way. When we look at financial institutions, of course, the first thing is security. So for us being a player in this exploratory phase, we will really be focusing on some of those core untechnical capabilities that we already have, but nothing is going to happen in this space without assuring things like data security, data privacy. And when we talk about our operational capabilities adapting, look, I think we're going to learn pretty quickly, putting the first few POCs that we start to implement with this kind of solution. When we think about scaling our operational capability, I think honestly, I'm more excited than anything because this, while it's an increase on the degree of automation we can provide for a client in their operation, there's also applications for our own efficiency internally. So selfishly, from an operations perspective, that kind of increases our internal operational efficiency and margin as well.
I think definitely a lot to be excited about, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to catch up on, especially in terms of the POCs in a future episode. But definitely looking forward to that. And I think like for large language models, there's certainly one way to leverage the data that you have. But then I think that there's other themes or other use cases that we can definitely talk about. We just talked about ESG reporting as well. So there's definitely a lot of things that you guys can do to be able to help companies really leverage their data. And Claire talked about how I guess LLMs and operationalizing this could also improve the internal efficiency of Blue Sheets as an organization. But today, I wanted to ask, like, how is Gen AI impacting your own sort of personal productivity as leaders and even within the organization of Blue Sheets? Any particular use cases that you yourselves are finding in terms of the tools out there, or any tools that you'd recommend as well?
I'm very much using it in novel ways at the moment. For me, I like to understand and see people make their early mistakes and I'm more excited to follow along with what's happening. But yeah, very novel applications for me at the moment. It's not something that we are actively applying internally at this point. But Christian, anything exciting that you've done so far?
I've played around with a couple. I definitely felt if you're starting from scratch with mostly anything, there will be a tool out there that will enhance that and will get you from step 1 to step 10 very quickly, whether that's creating any kind of document of sorts related to legal or whether that is creating a presentation. This Copilot idea, I think that is a very valid point for consumers where we will see a lot of AI enabled services that will act as a co-pilot for almost any profession out there. And I think looking at the VC landscape, most of the money is going into tools like that, or the foundations of it. Talk about vector databases, for example. So I think, yeah, very excited of what's to come at this exact moment in time. Yeah, played around with the technology. I think it's exciting for my day-to-day work. I think it hasn't really shined through just yet. But again, this is going to be happening, I think, in the next few months. I've already seen large funding rounds and the first products launching. So very excited about that. Yeah.
I definitely like what you mentioned about the co-pilot analogy, and I think Blue Sheets is if AI is a co-pilot, Blue Sheets is building the training schools for these pilots
That's right.
to actually fly out there and do their job properly. And I think one other thing that I really found interesting so far in our conversation is that I guess for enterprise in particular, what you're optimizing for would be quite a lot different from what the sort of the end user use case is optimizing for, right? Whereas for us,
Yes,
when we use ChatGPT, we want sort of speed, convenience, all of that. But as Claire mentioned earlier, for enterprise, you'd want focus on security, privacy, those things, right? So definitely other variables that you want to that you want to optimize for.